Welcome tonight. My name is Matthew Rao, and I'm co-chair of BeltLine Rail Now. I'm pleased to welcome you to tonight's forum, Transit in a Pandemic. Tonight's forum promises to be a spirited, informative look at the state of MARTA and the BeltLine and the other transit projects in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it asks the questions, where are we now and where do we go from here, among many others. BeltLine Rail Now is a grassroots organization formed in 2018 to ensure the inclusion of and construction of the 22-mile BeltLine Rail Loop in the city of Atlanta's and MARTA's plans. Over 2/3 of that light rail loop is part of the More MARTA program, as are many other mass transit projects. Our goal is to see that 2/3 served by operational rail by 2030. We realize that the success of each transit project that's part of More MARTA is tied to the success of the others because they only function optimally together. Tonight, we are joined by two leading voices in the Atlanta transit world, Jeff Parker of MARTA and Clyde Higgs of Atlanta BeltLine, Inc. We're excited to have them with us tonight and thank them for joining us. The discussion tonight will be moderated by Susanna Capelouto, who is the Senior Editor at WABE Radio, our local public radio station. And we hear her stories daily on NPR. Before we get started, I want to thank a couple of volunteers from BeltLine Rail Now, particularly Eric Goldberg, Mark Broadbeck, and Greg Schwartz, for putting tonight's program together. And now I'd like to turn the program over to Susanna, who will introduce our topic and guests and get us started. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Matthew, and welcome everyone to this virtual event. We hope to bring you some good insights into public transportation and transit in a pandemic. When I was first asked to moderate this discussion, I was intrigued by the words public and pandemic, which just don't sound like they belong together, but here we are. So we have two great panelists with us tonight. Jeff Parker is the GM and CEO of MARTA, and Clyde Higgs, the CEO of Atlanta BeltLine, Inc. They will first give us a short presentation of how their respective organizations are doing under the circumstances, and then I will ask a series of questions. And for full disclosure, I'm only the moderator for this event, and I have nothing to do with the questions. The questions were developed by BeltLine Rail Now. After the questions, we will open up for audience questions. So as we go along and you have a question, please type it in the chat box. Mr. Parker, we begin with you. Would you please take about 5 minutes, please, to make your opening presentation?
Sure. We're gonna talk a little bit about what's going on at MARTA since the pandemic began. Next slide, please. So it's hard to believe that it was beginning of March when we February, end of February, March, when we began to understand what was going on across the country. Have a little summary of many of the steps that we've taken internally to deal with the pandemic. It's critically important that we maintain support for transit in this region. We've got an incredibly fast-growing region, and transit needs to be a key to support that growth. So we've really focused on enhanced cleaning. We've had to make some significant service adjustments to make sure that we could both meet the needs of the ridership, who have changed their commuting patterns and what they're doing. We made some service adjustments where we reduced some service at the end of March. But more importantly, on April 20th, we had to go to an essential plan. We really haven't had a significant drop-off in our bus ridership relative to our rail ridership, and I'll show you that in a moment. So we had to identify several bus routes and double down on that service so that we could have social distancing within the bus. So this here is a summary of the many activities, and I'm sure that when we get into the questions, I'll talk about details of the things that we've done. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, on April 20th, we identified about 40 routes across the system that we identified as essential bus routes, and we wanted to make sure that our bus service and the crowding on the buses would allow for social distancing. We saw that as a critical component to people staying safe in this region. So we have closed off about half the seats on a bus, and therefore a bus is carrying about half the people, and to meet that same capacity needs, we need twice as many buses on a particular route. So we've shifted our bus routes to serve about 40 routes, and we've added about 5 additional routes, 45. And we're actually seeing increased ridership on our bus on the routes that we're still running. The next slide will show you, next slide, please. This depicts where our rail and bus ridership is. So we have significantly been impacted like the rest of the country's transit systems. You can see our rail ridership has bottomed out to somewhere about 25–30%. We have a very, very slow but steady growth of our rail ridership. But you can see a significant difference in the decline in our bus ridership. We have not had nearly as significant decline as our rail system, nor as we've seen other transit agencies around the country. So this is really the primary reason to having to double down on the service and change the service regiment that we put forward during COVID-19. We're monitoring the crowding of the buses and the trains daily to see where we need to add back service and how we can make service changes, both to meet the needs of our customers, but also encourage social distancing. Next slide. I think it's important as we move away from the sort of tactical things that we've done around the operation of our system. I think it's important to lay out the foundation of who we are at MARTA and the relationships that we have. So MARTA was created by the state about 45 years ago, and it allowed originally 2 counties plus the city of Atlanta and subsequently Clayton County to enact a 1-cent sales tax and ultimately join the MARTA district. Our relationship with these jurisdictions are through our rapid transit agreement and assistance agreement. And so we have this direct relationship with each of these jurisdictions as our funding partner. When the half-cent sales tax was established to fund the More MARTA program, we entered into a intergovernmental agreement with the city of Atlanta. We're about to execute a new one, an updated one that I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. And that's the agreement that will oversee and build the structure for us to construct and implement the city of Atlanta's plan for transit investment with that half-cent sales tax. Ultimately, you can see here, we want to make sure we show the relationship we have with Atlanta BeltLine, Clyde's organization, how it fits in, and ultimately, as we execute projects, and I know that's what people are interested in talking about, but we have a foundation of a relationship here. But when we implement projects, we will execute agreements with key stakeholders like Atlanta BeltLine, Inc. at the project level. Next slide, please.
Time to wrap it up, if you could. Please.
Yeah, I've got a few. Yeah, no, I'm going to go through my slides. Thanks for reminding me. I'm well aware of the time. This is important to lay the foundation for who we are. So we do receive a 1-cent sales tax. You can see how it's distributed amongst the counties. City of Atlanta, DeKalb, Fulton County. We generally split the sales tax between our system operation and our capital program. You can see the sales tax is by far the largest funding source that we have. Fare boxes are next, and we have a significant reliance on federal assistance. And on the capital side, we do a significant amount of bonding to allow our program to be implemented throughout the 10-year capital program that we put together. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of how COVID-19 has affected our bottom line. You can see our expenses were running well ahead of our operating revenue, or well under our operating revenue. And in March, when COVID-19 hit, that changed very, very dramatically. Next slide, please. So we're very fortunate. The transit industry has received a significant amount of funding to deal with the short from the federal government, the CARES Act. MARTA is receiving about $298 million of funds. We've programmed $150 million of that to plug the hole. Although, as you can see, in years to come, we will have a surplus that we'll have to deal with efficiencies and other impacts to make sure that we continue to have a balanced budget. We have had a balanced budget for about 8 years and are committed to continuing that. Next slide. This is a summary of the sequencing plan for the City of Atlanta program. We're really focusing on the area in blue right now, our next 5 years, making sure that we're advancing these projects. I think folks have seen this before. I won't go over it in detail. Just sort of pause here for a moment. We can look at it. Clearly, Streetcar Extension East, which includes transit on the BeltLine, is within that 5-year period, and we're actively working on that now. Next slide. And finally, just a summary of where we are in the advancement of this project, Streetcar Extension East. We're working with the City of Atlanta now. We'll move into the design phases in 22 to 24 with construction in later years, and the plan is to have that in service by 2027. So that's a summary of some of the things, and I hope that lays a good foundation for some questions that folks will be asking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Mr. Higgs, would you please give us a quick overview of the BeltLine in a pandemic?
Sure. So thank you, Susanna, Jeff, organizers of Rail Now. Appreciate you having us on this call. So yeah, so we are talking about the same thing. So we defined the pandemic starting in mid-March all the way through today, and you touched on it, Susanna, that a pandemic and density are not friends. They really don't go hand in hand, and so it's obviously been challenging to the tenets that we hold true at BeltLine in appreciating density. So it has been challenging in that sense. And just from an internal perspective, ABI, the organization that I run, we went into this telework mode starting March 13th, and we're still in telework mode as we speak. And then from an external perspective, and I know that most people that are listening to this call probably are well aware of this debate that we had about having the BeltLine open during the pandemic versus it being closed. But again, you have to remember what the BeltLine is at its very core. It is a transportation corridor, and we really stood true to those tenets and reminding people that it is not just a place for people to recreate, which is important as well, but literally it's an opportunity for people to get to point A to point B with regards to a place of employment, their home, medical facilities, grocery stores. That was the original premise of BeltLine, and so that was a really great debate that we had, and I want to thank a lot of people that are listening to this call for supporting us through that whole transition. But we stood true to the tenets of what the BeltLine is, and we remained open. And then later on in the discussion, I can talk about some of the numbers, the stats, because we have seen our user base decline significantly, and that was intentional. Our communications team did an amazing job of putting signs, social media, and we depressed our trail user numbers at one point at about 50% during that time compared to 2019. And so that was significant. And also just educating people using the trail, when are the hot periods, if you will, when you would see the trail more crowded than normal. And just again, trying to give people information so they can use the trail earlier in the morning or later in the evening, especially now that the entire East Side Trail and West Side Trail are lit.
Great, well, thank you so much. The first question is to you, Mr. Parker. Can you talk a little bit more about the safety of MARTA's employees and customers as they ride buses and trains and pass through stations now versus before the pandemic? What's different and how do we stay safe?
Yeah, well, the COVID-19 has had a profound effect both on our customers and our employees. We've had 169 employees contract COVID-19 to date. Pretty significant number. More significantly, we did have a employee pass away due to the virus, and our hearts go out to his family and his friends and his coworkers. So we've really focused on making sure that we're doing the things that the public health officials are recommending. One of the things that we moved with quickly, as I was showing in my earlier presentation, was focused on cleaning. We have a significant effort. We've done things including working with Delta Airlines to get they were incredibly helpful to us early on in this, and they were acquiring some misters and foggers that they use on their planes, and they were able to get some for us when just you couldn't buy this equipment. They were actually getting it directly from a supplier in China. So that's significantly impact our ability to clean our trains. We've instituted additional cleaning at the ends of our lines of our trains. Overnight cleaning is done. We've made sure that the products that we're using are effective against this virus. When the CDC moved to recommend mask usage for our employees, if you remember, we were all concerned about taking away masks from healthcare providers, and then the CDC recommended widespread mask usage. We made that distributed masks to our employees and made it a requirement of them immediately. And when the city of Atlanta moved to require mask usage in the city, we did the same for our patrons. The other important thing is that on our bus system, we're having people board through the back still. We're in the process of installing plexiglass shields, although there's a shortage of plexiglass right now, and that's slowing us down installing these shields so that we can restore service through the front door. So a lot of things are going on to do that, particularly focused around cleaning. And, I think the main point here is that we're really focused on making sure that all of the public health recommendations are being followed and staying closely to them. A part of it is perception. We need to make sure that our customers perceive the system to be clean. So we're doing things with several contractors who are cleaning parts of the stations that have probably never been cleaned, overhead concrete in the stations, and doing a significant effort to make sure that we're cleaning the stations like we never have before.
Great. The next question is for both of you. Will things ever return to how they were before, like even after the threat of COVID is over, whenever that may be, or are we looking at some permanent shift in how you operate now? Do you think that far ahead?
Yeah, so for us, yeah, so just to give you a little more insight into who we are, just organizationally, we have about 50 people inside of Atlanta BeltLine Inc. So we're pretty small, and just to kind of piggyback on what Jeff said, we had one employee that contracted the virus, and that person contracted it with significant symptoms, and happy to report that they are doing amazingly well. So they have recovered 100% there. So we're really excited about that. Returning to normal is going to be an interesting concept, because we all are hearing about the various iterations of what normal will be. And even for us internally as an organization, again, we have been in this remote mode for ABI for 5 months. And I will tell you, I'm a new convert. I wasn't always a leader that believed in remote and teleworking, but our team has done an amazing job in being productive. And actually, on the other side of the spectrum, I'm actually asking them to tap the brakes a little bit, because it seems like as far as the number of meetings and activities and just the work moving forward, people are working at a significant pace. And so I'm asking the team to actually create some space and balance. And so for us, I'm not certain that we will return to the office in the traditional way, and we're thinking through that. We actually have a task force internally for the organization that is thinking about what a return to work looks like for BeltLine. And then from a trail perspective, again, a pandemic is not a friend of density. And so are there things, or there are certain design elements that we can put into place to make sure that users of the BeltLine trail specifically are thinking about what is going to be the next wave of a pandemic, and are there certain things that we can design to make sure that people are safe. But the team is really focused on the communication side. And the reason why we stayed open in the first place is because, again, we are a transportation corridor first. And then also with the advice of Dr. Carlos Del Rio from Emory, who really recommended that the BeltLine stay open during this time so that people can get out, again, get to a grocery store, get to a doctor's office, get to a job, get to their place of where they reside. And so all of those things, we're thinking through. But for us, it has been over the top messaging, and so much that even our signs have made kind of an international recognition, where there's been a couple of publications to pick up our signs, because they've been a little bit innovative and a little bit risque. I will say that as well, but I think they've been effective, again, in depressing just casual use on the BeltLine.
Mr. Parker?
Yeah, I think, to answer your question, I first want to, sort of reflect on the things that we know that aren't going to change, and how important those things are. We live in a great city that is still going to be one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas in this country. We know that we live in a community that still has significant social and racial inequities that we've got to deal with. We know that there's a significant, problem around affordable housing and homelessness. So there's a lot of things that are constant here. I think, though, that there's some significant changes that are going to go on around how development happens, about people's commuting patterns, about what people are comfortable with, and we've got to react to those things. But I think that at our core, there's a lot of things that are challenges and positive things that are ahead of us that are still in front of us that we've got to recognize and deal with. So what we're doing at MARTA is, we are clearly focused on all of the trying to get our administrative personnel back into an office building. It's in some way that's going to be different, and I won't get into all the details behind that, but we're doing a lot of things around that a lot of businesses are focused on. I think more importantly, the question for me should be answered more around how is transportation need to change here in this region. And I think that it's evolving right now. I was on a call with Metro Chamber this morning that Ed Bastian was speaking at, the CEO of Delta, and he said, this is a marathon, and we're probably, COVID-19 is a marathon, and we're probably at mile 5 right now. So we're not quite sure how painful this is going to get. Going, through towards the end. So I think there's still a lot of uncertainty about where we're headed. But we have brought on a consultant, or about to bring on a consultant, to do a really comprehensive look at our bus network. We know that we need to find a better way to invest in our bus network. We've been working hard at making improvements, some through this expansion program, some through just operational improvements to make our bus system more reliable, more effective, more useful for our systems. We're blessed in this rapidly growing city with a heavy rail system that is serves where significant growth is, but has significant capacity to support additional growth through the city. So really what we need to do is to design our future systems to get people into our heavy rail system, which is always going to be that most effective and efficient way to move mass people. And basically, I truly believe that the growth that we're going to see and continue to project over the next, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, we still need to invest in transit to make sure that happens. The roadway network needs to improve, but those improvements aren't going to be sustainable over time. And I think investments in whether it's the BeltLine or whether it's Summerhill BRT or Clayton County, there's a lot of investments that we need to do. And so we're adapting. We're looking at how we need to adapt our bus system. And then on the rail side, we recognize that we need to become much more focused on our customers and dealing with the needs of our customers and making our customer experience one that is more appreciated, because we think our customers are going to come back, but there's going to be a level of paranoia about, is this safe? Is it clean enough? And we need to deal with that.
Yeah.
And before you go, Susanna, I just want to say, because Jeff touched on something really important, we cannot separate this pandemic conversation with the conversation that we're having about racial injustice and inequities. And we've got to keep that at the forefront. And that's why when Jeff made the reference to transit investment, that is so key to what we do and what's important to us from a BeltLine perspective, because ultimately what we're trying to do is connect people. And that's really what this is all about at the end of the day. It's about people, making sure that we can get people connected to amenities and job centers. And so this whole transit conversation is not one that we should have in a vacuum, but how do we do equitable development in our great city? We have one of the best cities in the world, and that transit piece is absolutely key to making sure that we develop in a very equitable way.
Yeah, good. It seems that right now the government has stepped in. You get some funding there, but if ridership recovers eventually, do we have to think differently about how we fund operations for transit? So that you're not that dependent on ticket revenue as it fluctuates. Are you thinking of other mechanisms in funding?
Well, from my perspective, absolutely. And while I have a clear role in influencing that, it's public policy decisions that are largely made in the Georgia State House and at the federal level. And clearly, being an influencer, that is important. I'm very involved in our trade organization, APTA. I run a biweekly call around COVID-19, but I'm also on our legislative committee. And there's some great things going on, particularly in the House right now, around funding for transit. We've made some headway, and recent bill that was passed puts a 25 and a 50-cent surcharge on Uber and Lyft. And although there's no mechanism to guarantee it goes to transit, there's a priority to give it to transit, and there's an additional funding source that wasn't there. That's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 to $25 million, which is not going to change the landscape in a significant way around the investment. I several years ago called for a $100 billion investment in transit over the next 40 years to support the growth of this region, and I still believe that's the case. And while $25 million is impactful, and we can do really meaningful things with that and change the lives of people and make people's commutes better and invest in economically and socially depressed areas, those are important. But we need some systemic change in how we fund transportation projects. So don't have all the answers, but it's something that I'm committed to trying to advance that.
Yeah.
Yeah, likewise. And I will just say, just to remind people how the BeltLine is funded, we are primarily funded by a tax allocation district. And so we get a portion of our funds through property tax and money that flows through APS, Fulton County, and the city of Atlanta. And then we also get a significant chunk of our money from federal sources. And then also the philanthropic community has been very kind to the BeltLine project. But let's remember, we have 10 years before our tax allocation district sunsets and we kind of go away. And so we have to start thinking about other creative ways to have a large infusion of cash, of revenue into the program if we are going to catch up and really kind of drive these milestones over the next decade or so. So we're going to have to be very creative in that way, and we're having some of those conversations right now.
Okay.
And there's conversations going on. The mayors along 285 have an interest in developing some sort of tax allocation district to fund BRT along 285. But then, interestingly enough, state law, the MARTA Act that created my organization, legally prevents us from receiving property tax. So we've got a lot of oddities in how we fund transit. But I think we've got to be creative. There's been some studies about parking taxes in districts that that some of the city council members have talked about. Congestion pricing and things like that. So I think we've got a lot of opportunities, but these are not easy conversations to have. There's no silver bullet that fixes all of these things, and there's also a lot of genuine needs around this landscape of improvements that we need to do to support a variety of infrastructure and other needs. So, but we need to focus on it, and we need to think boldly.
And talk about the region. Have either of you been in contact with the ATL, the New Transit Authority? And if at all, how do you see them working, with MARTA and the BeltLine?
Yeah, I'll start. And so yes, we have. So the BeltLine, we had a transportation task force under my predecessor, and so Chris Tomlinson, who obviously is involved with the ATL, was serving on that. And so there is a normal pace of conversation with the regional transportation leaders, but I know that also at a different level, Jeff and ARC and the ATL meet specifically on a number of items there.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of points in time where we connect with them. In fact, Chris Tomlinson sits as a member of the MARTA Board of Directors. So he's both my colleague around transportation here and I guess technically my boss as well. We actually invited the ATL to give an update today to the MARTA Board of Directors about they're advancing one of the requirements that the law that created the organization has is that they need to make an annual recommendation about funding of projects. So they are moving that forward, and we wanted to brief the MARTA Board of Directors about those projects, and we did that today. So there's a great collaborative effort going on around that, and opportunities to support growth throughout the region. We're working very hard with Gwinnett County. Gwinnett County has passed the commission has decided to have another referendum. In this case, it's through a mechanism that is created by the same law that created the ATL. So those projects have to be on the ATL's project list, and we're working hard with Gwinnett County to set up a fair and equitable arrangement because they want to have a heavy rail extension into Gwinnett County.
Maybe.
So there's a lot of connections.
Good. Back sort of to the pandemic, are you at all looking at other cities? Are you seeing anything around the country in regards to, say, operations or messaging that you could adopt here in response to the pandemic?
Yeah, I've been quite active in the transit community throughout my career, and right now I sit as the chairman of the Rail CEO committee for the transit organization APTA, and with that I run a every other week call. We'll have it next Monday. And we have representatives from every transit agency, and we have a weekly or every other, now it's every other week, it used to be every week, but call just keeping each other up to date about what's going on. Separate from that, I'm on a restoration and recovery task force where we're making some recommendations to the transit industry about both operational things, that's really my focus in this effort, but also messaging about how transit is changing and making sure that the people who both use us and support us understand how this pandemic has changed us and how we've reacted to those changes. So there's some great forums going on. We've from little things like we've taken the design of a box that we can hopefully use, although it hasn't borne out to be all that effective, to almost like a tissue box to allow customers when they walk in a station to pull a mask out if they don't have one from a property on the West Coast. So there's just a whole lot of collaboration going on in the transit industry right now, really healthy conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then specifically, if we're talking about projects like the BeltLine across the country, there is a group that is born from the High Line in New York City called the Network, and it roughly has 35 or so large-scale projects like the BeltLine in this consortium, if you will. And so we meet on a regular basis to kind of share best practices. But I will tell you, they look to Atlanta, they look to the BeltLine as kind of that big brother on how to think through things with regards to the pandemic, because a lot of our projects or projects similar to the BeltLine went through a lot of the same pain about, do you open, do you close? But if you look at some of the numbers in our group, probably 85% of those projects that are similar to the BeltLine, if you will, were open during that period, and a lot of that was taking from the leadership here in Atlanta. So definitely are getting good inputs from across the country and beyond. But again, Atlanta is looked at as a leader specifically in the space, like projects like the BeltLine.
Yeah, it seems like we're all learning as we go. And we also all learn a lot about science in this pandemic. And I wanted to sort of get your feedback on the idea of the ventilation in buses and trains. The New York Times did an incredible piece on how the ventilation in a bus could affect people getting infected or not infected, and it has a lot to do with the way the air flows. So have you all been thinking about that?
Oh, we've clearly, we've already taken on the easy thing to do, and that's to improve the the filters. If we all have air conditioners at our house, and we know that we have to change filters, but we invested and now use filters that are effective in cleaning. And I don't pretend to be a scientist nor want to be, but have an ability to provide a cleaner environment. But that's really a passive cleaning. There are some other products, but unfortunately, we're sort of, science. There's a lot of hokey pokey science out of there. So we've got to, this is one of the great forums that we have with the other transit agencies. I just got a email from somebody in Los Angeles who was sharing that a system that they used was when they tested it was not all that effective. But we're talking to several manufacturers who provide equipment to hospitals and looking at how we can make improvements to our buses and trains, the air filtrations and air handling systems. You have a bus and a train, really confined space. It's not like we can just add another air handling unit to it. So there's a lot of but there's some really small things. There's some things with UV light. I don't know that that's necessarily the right solution, but there's there are some other approaches and technologies out there that we're beginning to test and figure out what to do. And what we don't want to do is run headfirst into the first person who convinces us that this is the right thing to do, because the science is not there. The EPA has not said that these things are as effective as we need them to be. So I think we need to be a little bit cautious and invest our dollars wisely in things. But we're looking at all them, and we're committed to advance them.
Yeah, and that's definitely MARTA's based on that. But we've seen a number of interesting innovations, even from misters in the walkways of cars into the buildings that may be effective, but I think that there is a cautionary tale there that the science is evolving like every day. Mm-hmm. And so I hate to be so such from the Flintstone era, but wash your hands, wear a face mask, and I know that we're not going to do that forever, but right now those basics are really effective. And I actually do have a science background, and I won't go into but washing your hands and it's very effective, and that's what we have to be in the mode of, and let the science evolve enough to where we actually can make some real strong decisions about what's going to be effective from a public health perspective, and then I think we'll get there, and then let's keep our fingers crossed with a lot of the biotech companies out there that are trying to push this vaccine. That is going to be critical for us, but let the science evolve.
Yeah, the other thing is, it was, there was an article in the New York Times. We were talking about this briefly in the pre-call, and there were some really positive things that I read in that article. So I think transit as an industry can deal with this like the airlines. I think one of the interesting thing is that we've been really concerned about from a transit industry perspective is that there seems to be a very different standard that the federal government is imposing on the airline industry versus talking about, and here I'm talking about the CDC in particular. They've got some very different recommendations around efficacy and safety around transit and the airlines in an environment which isn't all that different. So we're a little worried about those sort of different perspectives that sit out there.
Are they different in terms of, are they stricter for airlines than for transit?
Well, the CDC has raised some concerns about transit that just that they haven't applied to the airline industry.
So they're tougher on transit, you would say, than airlines.
It seems like that, yeah.
My last question for both of you, and then we go to audience question, is what have you learned in this pandemic? What are some of the silver linings here that's come out of it for you and your organization?
Yeah, for us, yeah. So I'll go real quick, Jeff. So again, just from a work process perspective, I was not a big believer in remote and teleworking, and I have witnessed this 5-month clinical trial, if you will, and our team, and it seems like a lot of other organizations and businesses have done a great job in the whole telework piece. And so even for us, just thinking through, could we save money on our footprint from an office space perspective? And again, there's a lot of thinking to go into that, but again, the telework piece, it has been amazing in what our team can do, and not having to be in a central location 5 days a week, 10 hours a day.
But that means fewer people will have to go to work and use transit. So how will that affect you?
Well, yeah.
Are you thinking ahead? It's like, we'll see what ridership comes back at.
Yeah, a couple observations that I'll make. I've been working my career for the most part at very large public organizations in leadership roles, and whether it's what we're going through now or whether it was 9/11 or these big events, organizations like MARTA really pull themselves together internally in a prolific way during adversity like this. And so from a leadership perspective, just the commitment and the fact that it brings out the best in public employees trying to really make what they do a better place for the people that they serve. And there's so many stories of that. I would ask everyone to go search YouTube for our MARTA Heroes videos, and you'll see some amazing stories about people who are out there every day just working their tail off to make things better for you and I and our families. The other amazing thing to me is the story of what's happened with buses here in Atlanta. We have not had anywhere near of the decline that other large cities have had. And although, when we cut, we're only running about 45% of the bus routes that we normally run, we're running, generally speaking, double the frequency on those buses, although less capacity. And if you take, if I was to stand up right now, I can see the 39 bus route from my desk. The ridership on the 39 bus route is about 20% higher than it was pre-COVID-19. So people are riding our system. They've changed what they're doing. I'll be honest, it hasn't all sunk in, but there's a significant change that's gone on. I think a piece of it is about better quality service can be more attractive and get people more to where we go. And that's part of what we want to do with this sort of consultant that we're bringing on to really look at our bus network and redesigning our bus network to make it more effective for the region. So those are two of the glimpses into kind of silver linings that I see. And we've got I can't underscore the work that my management team is doing, as well as the frontline employees who are out there every day just doing an amazing job trying to make this a better place during a whole lot of adversity.
Great. All right. I now want to turn it, I guess, to Eric Goldberg, who has been checking on questions from our audience. Eric, can you give us a question?
Thanks, Susanna. Yeah, first one is for Clyde. It's from Rommel Chetman. Clyde, have you thought of a BeltLine development tax?
Say that one, a BeltLine development tax?
Tax, yes.
We are trying to be really creative, Rommel, and thanks for that question. There is a strong desire for the BeltLine to be completed. Some time ago, our organization commissioned a survey just to get a general feel for what the community is thinking about the BeltLine. And so high level, about 80% of the respondents, and we had thousands of people to respond to the survey, said that they still support the BeltLine, and it's still a good project for public investment. A couple of the challenges in that survey were obviously making sure that affordability is at the forefront of the BeltLine development. But there was also a second challenge, and it was the perception that the BeltLine is being developed slowly. And people are asking, when is it coming to my community? And so we have to be creative in thinking about ways in how to get the BeltLine funded, and not sure what that officially looks like right now, but we need a significant infusion of revenue for us to move the needle here soon.
Great. Tthank you, Clyde. A second finance question. This one's from Jay Shelton. Does revenue/taxes from scooters, et cetera, go towards transit and BeltLine improvement? Clyde?
No, they don't.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Beth Smith, and this one is for Jeff. Is there a way to improve community engagement? And along that same line, how can the community get the projects they see as priorities moved up the priority list on the More MARTA?
Well, there's always a way to improve community involvement, and I think that's been a big focus of MARTA, and it continues to be. We have built a very strong community engagement team on a project level, where the projects that we're really most focused on around community engagement right now, because we're moving into 30% design, is the Summerhill BRT. And that in community engagement is going really well. I'm not going to say that everybody is happy with every single decision that gets made in a project. And I've been involved in many projects in my career, and you always have impacts. But I think we're doing a fabulous job with the community engagement. We're always going to work to do that better. We're going to work on bringing technology. We're about to launch a dashboard for all of our projects, which will include the BeltLine projects, to make sure that we have good information available to users, to constituents, to elected officials, and making sure that we're getting information out to everyone. When it comes to the prioritization, we went through a very engaged process. We put together a very large group of leaders to make recommendations. We worked through that. We went through a lot of funding scenarios around how we would bond projects, and briefed. I spent time meeting with each of the city council members and getting input from them about our recommendation. And ultimately, the MARTA board of directors has approved it. Right now is the slide that I showed you earlier. We're really focusing on that 5-year period of time for projects that are in front of us, and speak up. Organizations like BeltLine Rail Now need to be effective advocates for advocating for projects, and that's important to making sure that people like me who run big organizations, public organizations, have a listen and react in a way that's appropriate.
Thank you. Next question from Grayson Foster. We know that in New York, each subway car has its air replaced 18 times an hour. Do you know the number for MARTA's rail cars? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I would like to know the answer to that, but what I will tell you is all of the trains are designed with very similar design standards. So I truly believe, but I can't say that I know that, but I do believe that it's very comparable to it. The way a subway car is designed, you have 2 different air handling units, one on each end of the train. they're redundant to each other. They're meant to be able to, you know, a train's an interesting, and this is getting a little wonky here, but you asked me the question. So, you know, the air conditioning system on a train is over designed, because you think about it, a packed train has a lot of hot bodies on it. And then the next thing that happens is all the doors open. And you know, on a hot day, what happens? More hot air rushes in, and then the doors close. And so these trains are designed with very specific requirements about people loading and the cycling of doors to make sure that you know, that you can cool the train. Now, it was designed for cooling, but obviously airflow, which now we're all of a sudden concerned about airflow, is you know, how we cool the trains. And then on top of that, we're opening and closing the doors all the time, which also creates movement of air in and out of the train. So now we're not an airplane that's going like 600 miles an hour through the sky that has an ability to use that to help exchange air. And, you know, physics come in here that we can't, you know, I think their statistic is like every 3 seconds, the entire, you know, in order for us to do that, we'd need like these air conditionings the size of the rail car to air handle, you know, that amount of air volume. But I suspect we're right around the same.
Thanks, Jeff. So next is a comment, not a question, from Ramel Chapman. Clyde, I commend you in learning from the pandemic and reimagining how your workforce will function going forward. Sounds like you have a fan of Ramel, Clyde. Next question.
Thanks, Ramel.
This is from next question from Alan Babelinski. Is MARTA going to completely drop its brand as part of the integration into the ATL? It would be a shame to lose such an iconic brand and name in Atlanta. Jeff?
Yeah, the short answer is no. You know, the MARTA brand is an extremely valuable brand. I fully recognize that it is somewhat, at least in this region, it is somewhat synonymous with transit. And the ATL is clearly trying to create a connection between, rightfully so, the variety of transit systems that are throughout the system. They are clearly moving forward with a co-branding mechanism. Actually, interestingly enough, when the law was passed for the ATL, it was only MARTA was required to actually adopt the brand. Although in the last session that was changed, and now all the transit entities will have to add that brand to the system. It'll be a co-branding effort. We're actually in the process of co-branding the trains over the next several months. So you'll start to see the logo, the ATL logo on alongside the MARTA brand. But the chevron isn't going to change. You know, I'm committed to the importance of the brand that we have. You travel through the city, you know where there's a bus stop because you see the 3 colors of the MARTA colors, and you know that there's a bus stop there. It's that simple, and we shouldn't mess with that.
Great, thank you. Another question from Beth Smith. When will we know whether COVID will impact funding or construction timeline of rail and BRT projects that are planned? What should the public know about possible delays or an ability to accelerate projects? Jeff?
Yeah, we're monitoring this closely. No doubt there are going to be impacts. Our system, the 1 cent sales tax, the core MARTA system is heavily supported by sales tax. The investment of more MARTA in the city of Atlanta is completely supported by sales tax. I honestly think it's too early to really truly understand what the long-term impacts of sales tax over 30 years will be. But we're going to monitor it. We're going to be transparent about it. And, I suspect there's, no doubt about it, there are going to be impacts. What we've done in the short run is we're not reducing the funding of our capital program on the existing 1 cent, the 1 cent sales tax side, because we know that You know, maintaining our system in a state of good repair is critically important. And, you know, we're going to work hard to deliver projects as efficiently as possible. But clearly this pandemic has had a significant impact in funding. I don't know how significant that will be over 30 years, but it's real, and we'll have to react to that.
Great, thanks. I'm going to turn things over to Matthew Rao to close things up, and I do want to thank the panel for an engaging discussion and for lending us their time and expertise. Matthew?
Yeah, thank you, Eric, and thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Clyde, for being here, and especially thank you, Susanna, for moderating this evening. This forum is the second forum we've brought to you from BeltLine Rail Now, and like the first, it will be available recorded on our website within the next couple of days, and you can go to beltlinerailnow.com to find it there. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I want to thank the audience for joining tonight. This topic we felt like was where the whole conversation needed to start about where we go with transit, because this is central to what's on everyone's mind collectively. And we will be bringing you forums on other aspects related to the BeltLine and the other more MARTA transit projects in the future. And we hope that you, Clyde, and you, Jeff, would be willing to come back and speak with us again on those when we host them. So
Absolutely.
Awesome. Really appreciate it. So to everyone, good night tonight, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, everyone.
As Clyde said, wash your hands.
Wash your hands. All right. Jeff, Susanna.
Thank you.
Matt,
yeah, thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.